Uh, Welcome. Uh, Today we'll be going over magic pairing, which is Apple's take on securing Bluetooth peripherals by Dennis Hines, Jessica Klassen, and Felix Rohrbach, presented by Dawei and myself, Matthew. Cool. So a little overview, basically they're abstract. So today we're going to be going over 7 parts. We're going to introduce the topic of magic pairing, and I suppose the both existing solutions and why magic pairing is so great. We're gonna talk a little bit about the magic pairing protocol and how that works with essentially the Bluetooth and the authentication scheme that it takes. We're gonna cover the security properties of magic pairing and also the implementation details. Then Dawei will talk about fuzzing with toothpicker and the vulnerabilities of magic pairing, and then conclude. So a little introduction, focusing solely on classical Bluetooth device pairing. There are some shortcomings highlighted by this paper. Specifically, usually these classical Bluetooth is not scaled for pairing to multiple devices all at once. And also, once the permanent key is leaked, all security assumptions break for both past and future connections. And this is exploited through either man-in-the-middle attacks while pairing or remote code execution techniques within the chip. So essentially, the most vulnerable part is while things are getting authenticated once they're establishing their initial connection.
What do you mean by permanent key?
Permanent key. I think they put permanent in. I'd say I think that means more of the session key. If that makes sense.
That's going to be different for each of the device. Is that right?
That's correct in a classical Bluetooth setting, yeah.
But for some cases, such as Bluetooth, input pairing, where you type in a code, sometimes you are pairing with a device that doesn't give you that, path input function. Mm-hmm. So it will have a permanent key or a permanent code imprinted in there. And all you have to do is maybe on your computer, you type in that code, right? That will be a permanent key.
Oh, okay.
Are you referring to that? Because I don't think that's going to be the case, because if that one is, even if that one is leaked, you still, will there be a vulnerability for that? So let's say all the wireless mouse, they have this code, maybe something like a 1, 2, 3, 4. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that when they establish a key, it's going to be the same? I don't think so. Yeah, I think sessions key might be the more correct interpretation of the permanent key here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think. Oh, okay. Just kind of a look ahead. So they called, I don't know, they called this the permanent key, like in their paper. I guess because in the magic pairing example, it's less permanent because for some reason I guess for security reasons, they like to generate fresh new keys for every, for each session.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So with Apple Magic Pairing, there's a one-time pairing of the AirPods to integrate with the entire system instead of individual connections. It essentially pairs with one device, which then passes it on and pairs it with iCloud. So you get one connection will connect it with the whole system. And there's supposedly better security with fresh session-based keys. Yes.
I see.
So the
basically, so you're gonna presented that in detail later. But basically, the idea of Apple Magic pairing is they use their public key infrastructure based on iCloud.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
So the proposed solution, or essentially, yeah, what they did in this paper was they attempted to reverse engineer the magic pairing protocol, because this is proprietary. It's not really released anywhere. They've performed a security analysis on that protocol, and they've tried to document the proprietary Bluetooth protocol and the corresponding stacks. They did a manual test of magic pairing for bugs and using fuzzing techniques, and they also looked into vulnerability analysis.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between security analysis and vulnerability analysis?
I assume that, or at least what I read in the security analysis, they're just looking like, oh, hey, look how secure it is. It does all this with the keys and stuff. And I assume for vulnerability analysis, they're using sneaky ways to try to exploit the protocol or gain access to.
So their security analysis is theoretical.
I believe
and
so.
vulnerability analysis is experimental.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So just a couple issues beforehand. This is just the introduction still. They wanted to provide a proof of concept for the exposed vulnerabilities at the towards the end of the presentation. They found that right off the bat, this is susceptible to zero-click wireless attacks, just because the magic pairing is available before the encryption process happens. I suppose that's just the authenticate part of just a fundamental flaw in the authentication process at the beginning. It's susceptible to a lockout attack, a DOS attack, and there are a few inconsistencies between the Bluetooth stacks. By stacks, I mean you're dealing with different operating systems. Like, so you have Mac OS and you have iOS for phones, and then you have this what's it called? You have this third stack. Basically, it's for low-powered Bluetooth, and so they all have kind of different capabilities. But this is trying to kind of bring them all together in one system. So there are different. They claim there are different flaws based on the capabilities of each device.
So are you saying that the different, Apple's OS, the Mac OS, and their iOS has different implementation of the Bluetooth stacks?
Yes, yes.
What are the differences?
I can cover that later. It's just missing. It has some. I can just skip ahead real quick. This is the diagram that they gave. So it looks like they're missing some stuff in the user space.
Okay. But you're gonna explain this diagram later, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on.
Okay. Cool. So tackling the magic pairing protocol, it's Apple's proprietary protocol for seamless pairing. So essentially, it produces the link key, which is, I guess, the primary key for Bluetooth authentication between devices using iCloud, as I explained before. So this authentication happens in 5 major phases. First is the key creation and distribution. Phase 2, it produces a hint. Phase 3 is ratcheting. Phase 4 is AES-SIV. It actually produces kind of a second randomized key using AES encryption. And phase 5 is finally the link key derivation and finalized authentication.
I'm not quite sure what each phases are for. So during key creation and distribution, what they are trying to do?
So I think phase 1 is I'll show you this diagram. So key creation, it creates kind of a master key within the device, I guess the primary device, and it sends it to both the iCloud and it distributes it to the AirPods or the requesting devices, they call it.
Okay. How about, so this is your second slide, right?
Yes.
Well, I mean, this is slides after your previous, the one that you give an overview about the magic pair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so okay, let's just use this slides. Can you continue explaining each of the phases?
Okay. Then it sends a hint, and this is supposed to do something along the lines of ensuring both sides will agree on the same fresh session key in the end. So I guess they kind of update in sync in every session.
How do they do that? Why? Okay, two parts question. When do they call it hint?
I think the information that it sends on in this hint is important for the rest of the process. I believe this hint is incorporated in part of the ratcheting process later on.
Oh, so that so you are. Let me see. I couldn't quite see. So you do an encryption with your. Is that your master hint? That's generated during your setup phase, right?
Yeah.
So you have a master key, you have a master hint, and you generate a specific hint or a encrypted hint based on the receiving device. That's your AirPods, and encrypted with ECB. Is that right?
ECB. Sure.
Encrypted. What is the subscript?
Oh yeah, it says ECB.
So AES ECB. So you encrypt your master hint. So the master hint basically is like a key. And you generate a hint specifically for the address of the receiving device. Meanwhile, you have a key derivation function that take the acknowledged key and some random number, I guess. What's the second parameter of the ACK key?
Of the ACK key.
At the receiver side after KDF1.
KDF1 ACK key.
Right?
Oh, okay. 1x10 times 0x0. Is that the hex? Oops.
Also generate a nuance and a bracket host. Not so sure what this is for. You have a hint, but that hint is nowhere. So you have a hint x0x10 that is generated from your iPhone side. Where is that hint go? Where does that hint go? Is there anything like the receiving of your hint 0x10 at the other side, at the AirPod side?
I am not sure.
No, I don't see it, right?
Yeah, I don't see it either. Correct.
Let me see.
Local accessory key lookup.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on.
Okay.
So, what is the purpose of ratcheting?
Ratcheting, I believe, has to do with key rotation. I think I might have said it here. It's part of the key rotation and derivation phase. So magic pairing, I believe, focuses on short-lived session keys. I guess because you're disconnect or you're not using your AirPods all the time. So when it's offline, I believe when it reconnects, it rotates the session key. Basically, it focuses on maintaining and renewing. Yeah. But I thought that this phase in the authentication part kind of sets up ratcheting for future connection.
This is the magic pair protocol. So we probably need to do a more detailed study about this part. So let me analyze this. So you have two dashed line, vertical dashed line, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it segmented this whole thing into three parts, right? One on the left, one in the middle, one on the right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So does that mean those three parts are executed as different entities?
I believe so, yes.
So who will be executing the left parts?
The left part is the iPhone, right? Calculating the ACK key and CIV key.
How about the middle parts?
That's just sending things back and forth, right?
Okay, and the AirPods will do the right parts,
The
right?
KDFs, yes.
Okay, so that means the information that you are sending over is also computed. Well, depend on the arrow, but it's computed by one of the parts, either iPhone or AirPods, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So the iPhone at the beginning, during the setup phase, it generated a master key and master hint during 1A, the key creation, and send it to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. During 1B, the key distribution, it send a ACC key, acknowledgement key. I don't know whether it's acknowledgement ACC key via either SSP or AAP protocol to the AirPods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now iCloud is in possession of the master key and the master hint, and the AirPods is in possession of the ACC key, right? And then during the pairing phase, well, the whole thing below setup is pairing phase. The first thing is for the iPhone to acquire the Bluetooth address blob of the AirPods, right? And then it generates a hint. We don't know what that is for, and encrypted with, I would assume to be the master key.
Oh.
And it generates a random number, And it also generates the ratchet host. It's probably an address for this AirPods to reply to. Or some kind of server identifier that is because during Bluetooth you have a server, Bluetooth server on your iPhone where you can query and get information. So this racket host will refer to the server on the iPhone device. Okay, and the AirPods side will do a key derivation function, and it will have a local ratchet, which is kind of like, I believe, a timer, and it will generate another ACC key derived from the original ACC key, right? So this encryption ECB take the original ACC key and update it with some other random number. So it's trailing it with a key of its own and do another round of encryption, which will basically derive a new key. Right? So it will just repeatedly derive a new key, basically evolve this key as goes, right? And then it will generate a authentication key. So during each of the derivation, whenever it generates a new ACC key, it will derive a authentication and an encryption key using another basically key derivation function. And that function, that key, is send it back to the iPhone. Using the SIV key, which is basically the generation, the authentication and encryption key the AirPods wants to use, and this key is sent back to the iPhone in an encrypted format. Right, that is the ratcheting is for, right, and also the server host, the ratchet of AirPods, the address of the ratchet, I believe is some kind of service identifier. And once the iPhone receives that SIV key, which is the authentication and encryption key the AirPods wants to use, it will calculate the ACC key and SIV key by basically decrypt this thing. But it doesn't say what kind of key is used for decryption. Okay, and then for the AES SIV, it will generate another authentication key and encryption key and send it to the AirPods. So both parts now are in possession of the SIV key, which is for authentication and encryption. Okay, so number 4 is probably just for verification. AES SIV allow the AirPods to confirm that the iPhone successfully derived the SIV key. Okay, and then the following step is pretty much using the SIV key to do a further key derivation function to generate a session key. Okay, so in the end, they will both in possession of a session key derived from the ACC key and the SIV key. And the entire process is supposed to be secure. That means there is a critical step to allow both parties to encrypt and decrypt using a symmetric key encryption and decryption function. which is that ENC-ECB. Because if you see a check from both ENC encryption ECB and encryption SIV, those are symmetric key encryption. So for the receiving party to be able to decrypt, it must in possession of the symmetric key. So my question is, what is the key they use for encryption ECB? And what is the key they use for encryption SIV? I think that should finish up our analysis. Can you answer the question, Matthew?
What is the key that they use for ECB? Like, how do they encrypt it?
No, which key they use to encrypt it?
I'm not sure.
Is that the master hint?
I think.
Not sure.
Not sure.
In the paper, does it mention that AirPods, the receiving party of the magic pairing, get a hold of the master hint?
I thought they only get the accessory key. Oh, AC key stands for accessory key.
Okay, so what is accessory key? It says the magic pairing relies on a shared secret between the AirPods and the user's iCloud devices.
Mm-hmm.
The accessory key. This key is created by the first device pairing AirPods for a specific iCloud account. After establishing an encrypted Bluetooth connection using SSP, the accessory key needs to be transmitted to the AirPods, and Apple is using the AAP protocol for the accessory key transfer. In addition to the accessory key, the host also create an accessory hint, which uniquely identify the connection between an iCloud account and the target device. The initiating device uses the iCloud account master key and master hint to create the accessory key and accessory hint. Okay, so that means the key distribution process is actually distributing a ACC key to the AirPod, and the ACC key is actually the one that is going to be used for the encryption. Yeah, here you see the Bluetooth address blob is then encrypted with the master key using AES in ECB mode to create the accessory key.
Okay, I got you.
The accessory key is created by encrypting the Bluetooth address blob with the master key hint.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then, when it's trying to create a hint for the right, so the hint 0x110 is trying to create that accessory hint using the master hint, and it's encrypted with the master hint, right? So that encryption ECB is the master hint is actually the key for that encryption. Okay, so that function means for all the encryption function, the first parameter is going to be the key they use for the encryption.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So basically, they use the encryption function as a key derivation function, right? So if you encrypt a fixed length contents with the key, you basically get another key. And because you are doing that encryption layer and layer of encryption, all your key basically derived from this master key. And all your hints are derived from this master hint. Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. Okay, keep moving.
Okay. Okay. I guess we'll move on to the security properties now. So I guess the goals of the magic pairing protocol were to provide a sense of authentication for all devices, create that pressured key for each connection. And this is achieved through the symmetric ratcheting algorithm, which uses the ratcheting, same kind of ratcheting that we previously used for authenticated encryption. So a little bit about the symmetric ratcheting algorithm. It uses a double ratchet algorithm for the second device, and that allows it to create a new key for each Bluetooth connection. And essentially, what I thought it meant was that instead of having message keys for each for the Bluetooth connection, it replaces it with the kind of overlying connection key, if that makes sense.
Okay, I think I start to understand this protocol. Can you go back to the protocol page? So the key idea here for Apple to improve Bluetooth is they create this ratcheting process that basically give all the device an opportunity to create a chain of derived key. And that key comes from a master key that the device, the first device that register in the iCloud generates. So all the key that will be used for the pairing associated with same iCloud account will all derived from the same master key and master key. Okay, so the basic idea here is simple. When this iPhone and AirPods, they first establish a regular Bluetooth connection. Okay, and through that connection, that Bluetooth connection can be authenticated. It might not be authenticated. At least it should have minimal security, which means at least it's encrypted. Okay, so that Bluetooth is somehow subject to something like man-in-the-middle attack. Because if this thing is only authenticated, if this thing is only encrypted but not authenticated, someone sitting in the middle will pose as the AirPods to the iPhone and the iPhone to the AirPods and generate two separate key and give it to the iPhone and AirPods. So that man will serve as a man-in-the-middle attack. So that Bluetooth connection cannot prevent that. So if you just repeatedly, or if you rely on that Bluetooth connection to secure the communication between the iPhone and AirPods, it is subject to manipulation. Okay, but the magic pair protocol doesn't use that Bluetooth connection for communication. It only uses it for key distribution. Okay, the idea here is during step 1B, the Bluetooth connection is leveraged for the iPhone to transmit a derived key and the accessory key and the accessory hint to the AirPods. Okay, and that accessory key will be used to generate this key for AES-SIV. What is AES-SIV? AES-SIV is an advanced AES encryption that protects both the confidentiality and integrity of the data you transmitted. So it gives you both the authentication function as well as encryption function. But it's probably going to need a longer key. That's why when they try to generate the SIV key, it used the accessory key and with some other parameter follows it. So in KDF2, that's when it generates that AES SIV key. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the good part here? So it sounds like the iPhone is only use the Bluetooth connection to give the AirPods another key, right? So that key will essentially provide both the protection for authenticity and confidentiality. But the good part here is because of this ratchet process, they basically, you can generate or derive this key multiple rounds. So you take this accessory key, which is derived from the master key, and then you just use this accessory key to derive your own key. And that will be your AES SIV key. Okay, what if another device try to pair with iPhone? Then you don't do that entire process. Well, you still need to do the key distribution, but you can basically give the same accessory key. But the receiving device, instead of running one round of KDF, it runs 2 rounds of KDF. Then it basically creates a chain of derived key. And at the very tail of that chain, you have your key that is specifically for the new device. So you see, when you have a new device coming in, you can still use this chain. You just create another node at the ending part of this chain. And all of a sudden, you have a new AES SIV key that will protect the authenticity and the confidentiality when you try to communicate with the device, iPhone, which registered in the iCloud. So it's like a keychain. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is basically the magic pair protocol. So what iPhone did, the clever here, is they piggyback their key exchange protocol on top of the Bluetooth stack. So they have their own keychain they want to distribute to all the devices that associate with this user. And they use the Bluetooth, which is subject to various type of attacks, to distribute their key infrastructure. And once this key is distributed, they will basically use the physical layer communication of Bluetooth stack, but on the top, in the MAC layer, they will enforce the security through their own key infrastructure. That's the whole idea of magic pair. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, okay. I think we have a better understanding of this protocol now. Let's move on.
Okay. Oh yeah, these are just the key derivation functions as defined in the paper.
Right. So now we understand the general or the high-level concept of what each of the derivation function for. You see that those parameters you might require a little bit detailed analysis, but we know intuitively what they're for, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, okay. And then we look at the implementation details, or how this magic pairing is implemented into devices, and we look at the stacks, meaning the Bluetooth stacks, the messages, AirPod advertisements, and code quality. These were just all short little snippets of or comments in the paper about Apple's implementation. So they talk about, they just define Apple's Bluetooth stacks here, and they say, we'll talk about it in detail later in the paper, but essentially they provide this diagram and show that the Bluetooth stacks in these different devices aren't necessarily equal. They have, at least here, different chips. They run on different operating systems, and yeah. They actually later found that while these things were called the same thing, they had minor discrepancies between the two. Yeah.
And why do they analyze the Apple's Bluetooth Is that something that will create problem for the magic pair?
I assume that it's opened up the more of the more susceptible to different types of vulnerabilities. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think the paper highlights that it's just a lot of more maintenance overhead from Apple, in the sense that they do have to have 3 separate implementations, and
But that's Apple's problem, right?
yeah. So I guess it's trying to justify the fact why there might be while one thing, like maybe your MacBook might not be susceptible to something because it's implemented in a whole different sense. Yeah, your phone might.
It might be different right now. So your new version of MacBook are also ARM based. So so maybe their protocol will look similar in the future. So I don't think this is an essential issue.
Okay.
But for the peripheral devices, like the AirPods, if their implementation is different from other peripheral devices that the PC can connect to, that might be a problem, because basically we can only use Apple's Bluetooth devices with other Apple devices, right? But that's okay. So that's their closed ecosystem. That's their philosophy. Doesn't necessarily mean a problem. Okay.
And they also define, I guess, how the messages are sent via magic pairing. I think they said something about the ping.
What they said?
When it sends a ping message, then it replies with a hint message.
Right. That's the process of that ratcheting. So whenever you request, so remember that the ratchet ID that I mentioned in the protocol, those are probably something similar to the Bluetooth server. When you ping it, it will reply some information that associated to how you're gonna connect to it. In this case, it's returning a short message about the hint, right? So yeah, so this idea here is still consistent with their magic pair protocol. So they have this ratcheting process. Whenever you pin it, it will basically ask the device to do another round of key derivation. That allows the multiple devices to share the same key chain, right? Okay.
I guess adding on, there's 2 types of messages. One is just the message format, and the other, it corresponds to the key. This can be a variable length, while this is usually not a variable length. I guess they were just comparing. Yeah.
Right.
And then just a little more about implementation. Talking about AirPod advertisements in the sense that data it advertises using Bluetooth, whether it be for discovery or broadcast messages. And it says it can decrypt BLE advertisement info. Basically, like when your AirPods come by a device and they'll say, "Oh, Matt's device connected," stuff like that, and it does that sync if the Apple IDs match during the connection. Yeah.
What's the second one is for?
It says something along the lines of it sends more data if the Apple, or it displays data on your device, like on your iPhone, if the Apple ID matches.
The magic pair. What is the purpose of AirPod advertisement? Matthew?
Yeah. When the AirPods will give off Bluetooth advertisements, and I believe it says if it's connecting with your phone, then it'll send information if the two you know can authenticate if the Apple ID matches.
Okay.
So yeah. Yeah.
Okay, not very clear here.
Mhm.
Okay, but let's move on here.
Okay, and code quality, they just point out that there's some mistakes. Like there's recurring spelling mistakes within the code. So they speculate that Apple might have outsourced this code or done a bad job quality controlling. So it could have more vulnerabilities.
All right.
Dawei can present his part now.
Okay, now I will present the fuzzing. So they implement two kind of fuzzer. The first one's over the air fuzzer. So that's they alternate a app called internal blue. So the advantage of over the air fuzzing is platform independence and it provides less false positive. I think the fewer false positive rate is compared to the next implementation in process fuzzer.
So what is a fuzzer?
Fuzzer is a application that's stand on the for the over the air fuzzer is just a app keep sending random valid or invalid packet, Bluetooth packet to the target device. For the in-process fuzzer, it is a application that inject into some code, inject into the Bluetooth daemon. Do the same thing as the.
What is the purpose of the fuzzy?
Sorry, can you repeat?
What is the purpose of fuzzy? You said it's either inject code into the stack or try to send it to the stack. And
yes.
what's the purpose of this fuzzing?
The purpose of this fuzzing is to find if there exists some vulnerabilities in the Bluetooth stack of the magic pairing.
And you can discover that with fuzzy?
Yes, they will send, for example, they will send a valid command with a invalid, with a random payload to see if they can, if the connection is has been disconnected.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, but there's some limitation for the over-the-air fuzzing. So the first one is the connection termination. The device will disconnect, will terminate the connection if it receives several invalid messages.
Okay.
The second one, the second one is the speed. They can only send 2 packets per second in this fuzzer. And the third one is the coverage. Because they don't have the information of the target device, so they cannot find the code coverage for the fuzzer during the fuzzer attack.
I see.
And the second one, so the implementation of the over-the-air fuzzer is just a generation-based fuzzer. It randomly generates valid and invalid messages and send to the target device until it receives this message HCI disconnect complete. That means a disconnection it indicates either the target disconnect from the connection due to several invalid packet, or that's a crash. So to observe this, they use the packet logger in Mac OS and iOS. If they see a connection to device has been lost, that indicates a crash. But for the airport, they can only play music to see if there's a disconnect, but they cannot identify it is a disconnection or that's a crash.
So their idea of testing the magic pair protocol's vulnerability is first they establish a connection between an iPhone and a peripheral device such as AirPods, and then they just send the random commands.
Yeah.
From the commanding device, which is the iPhone, to the peripheral.
Yeah.
And the peripheral basically has a error.
Yeah.
Okay. But that doesn't necessarily attack their pairing process, right?
No, it's not.
This is
it's not about the
pairing is completed.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
Okay, so the second fuzzer is the in process. So the throughput of the message and the stability of deliver is much higher because the fuzzer is in the Bluetooth daemon. The drawback is that they cause many false positives because when they inject the code, it may create some issues that they cannot predict. And of course, it has this in-process future is a platform dependence. As we mentioned before, Apple has 3 different stacks, Bluetooth stacked. So they can only use
process fuzzing. Also, it try to modify the Bluetooth stack of the commanding device, which means either the iPhone or the Mac OS, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, but they only apply to Mac OS.
In order to do that, you need to modify. You need to have a root access to either the iOS device or Mac OS to modify their Bluetooth related Bluetooth code stack related codes. Right?
Yes, I think so. And yeah, they also need the root to inject the code to the Bluetooth daemon.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's why they cannot do it on the RT kit, which is the Bluetooth stack for the AirPod, because it's the firmware. They cannot do the reverse engineering.
Right. It's better to do it with the operating system.
Yeah. So this the setup for the in-process parsing. They implement a manager, sit in the laptop, and then the manager will send the C along we send the entries to get to the corpus and also send the C to the input mutation, and the input mutation will send will return a random input to the manager, and the manager will send the input to the target device. So the target device had two kind of the fuzzing hardness. The general one is handle all of the Bluetooth respond to the overall fuzzing of the Bluetooth daemon.
Right.
And the specialized is responding to the special protocol such as magic pairing.
Right.
And then the specialized hardness will execute the command such as call the function, and the returns had three kind of resource from the iPhone, and then you send it back to the laptop. So they have the ordinary return, and the manager will report the coverage to the manager, or it will raise an exception. The exception will see as a crash, and they also have a uncontrolled crash, which means that that's a crash that a thread that is not controlled by the fuzzing hardness, but it is a crash. It's not controlled by the manager. We also record this. So now let's move to the vulnerabilities. So the first one is the non-pointer dereference. So if the device will do a table lookup when they do the magic pairing, if the device is not on the list, it will return a not. And sometimes it will cause the Bluetooth daemon crash. So the second one is just similar to the first one. When we ping an iOS device from an unknown device, then we will receive a message that is it doesn't have the hint. And after that, if we send a ratcheting message to the target device, I mean the iOS device, if you go to if you call the MP entries remote SSIV, which is a null pointer entry, and the Bluetooth daemon will crash.
I see. So there is no catch for a null pointer.
No.
Okay. All right. That's just insecure code.
Yeah. So this one is very similar to the previous one. Just return the null value when they do the lookup function, and they don't verify the return value.
Okay.
And the other one is the retching abort. So when the co-parser, the retching message attempt to if you read from the buffer, and there's a assertion to ensure that there's no read beyond the buffer. But once the assertion fail, it will call above and the resource crash. So yeah, I think they should just replace the assertion with a try a catch.
Right. And okay, so my previous statement was wrong. So this fuzzing process actually is targeting about the pairing.
Some yes, but some
right.
not.
So, right, something like this. These messages are during the pairing process, right?
They don't have to in the process. It just send a ping, and because the device will if you inlock, it doesn't verify the address of the sender. If you just keep processing the command.
Does it mean that after the Bluetooth connection and before the magic pairing complete, the device, the commanding device, already capable of sending data to the peripheral devices? Because if you take a look at your previous slides about the result that is considered as a, go back more, back again. That's forward. That's forward.
Oh, forward.
No. Right. Yeah. So over the air fuzzing, for instance, you say that it will randomly generate a valid and invalid message until it receives this HCI disconnection complete message. And
yes.
And then you will just basically observe whether there's a packet logger that's shown that HCI disconnection complete message in macOS or iOS, or you see whether this AirPod, the peripheral device, is functioning by playing music.
Yep.
But, based on the analysis, I see that the messages, the valid and invalid message, are targeting toward magic pair, right? So if you consider the second bulletin point and the fifth bulletin point, does that mean that after the Bluetooth pairing, before the magic pairing, the AirPods, your earpiece, is already playing music? That means you are transmitting the data through the original or generic Bluetooth connection.
Oh yeah.
So the magic pairing is basically a process that is done after the Bluetooth connection and is not necessarily required for data communication. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the next one is the raging loop for the Mac OS. So the AirPod trusts the value set in the hit message. So when we send the hint to sorry. After this, if the AirPod send the retro a very big value than the retro value in the Mac OS, it will update the local retro value on the Mac OS side without verifying if the Mac without verifying if it's actually sending if that value is too big or like that. So after that, if the the victim airport trying to connect with this one. If you send the local reg in this airport is smaller than the reg value in the iPhone. I'm sorry, I mean the Mac OS. And then this route will never execute.
Right. Yeah, so basically the idea here is you piggyback your magic pair on top of a Bluetooth connection. But still, you need to basically distribute your key chain, right? So that means that you have a key establishment protocol somewhere in place that will establish this key that allows you to do an encryption, which guarantees the authenticity and the confidentiality. But that key pairing process is on top of a protocol that doesn't necessarily robust against the man in the middle. So this thing, by inherency, is also robust and not, not robust to man in the middle. So if there's someone else sitting in the middle, sending and modify the message, the magic pair process will be vulnerable. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So the last one's pairing.
This is basically a man in the middle, right?
Yeah, kind of, because the attacker knows the IP address of the victim and the target airport the target airport.
Right. So you basically sitting in the middle and manipulate the message, because the initial communication they are done through the Bluetooth. That means they are unauthenticated, right?
Yeah.
If the magic pair are complete, then everything's fine because you have authenticity and confidentiality. But during the key pairing process, there's no guarantee that there won't be anybody sitting in it. So Apple's improvement is basically once this magic pairing is complete, the communication can protect against the man in the middle attack. So there will be a shorter period of window compared to generic Bluetooth connection, where it's vulnerable to man in the middle, which is during this magic pairing.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So this one's similar to the previous one, just modify the reg value to make the sender's one higher than the current one, because the loop doesn't execute.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the conclusion that magic pairing is convenient because it's scale for pairing multiple devices under this same iCloud account.
So basically the idea here is, well, for a device that try to pair with another device, all you have to do is to grab that keychain and derive your own new key, right?
Yeah.
And you can grab that keychain anywhere from a paired device.
Yes.
Right. So it's instead of have a kind of a star topology where one device try to pair with multiple devices. Now you have this opportunity, as long as you recognize another device which already linked to this iCloud account, you can grab his keychain and you generate your own key, right? So that makes it more scalable and distributed. So that's basically the idea. It's like instead of a star, it's more like a graph. Okay.
And then also provide further security. So as I mentioned,
that's a good word. It doesn't prevent anything, be after the Bluetooth connection before the magic pair complete. But once magic pair is completed, anything beyond that point will be secure, right?
Yeah. And then still has some vulnerabilities, as I just talked about before. And they implement two kind of fuzzer, in-process fuzzer and over-the-air fuzzer. So the in-process fuzzer is with a higher performance to find the coverage, and then they use the over the AI fuzzer to verify the result because it has less false positives. Yeah, that's
Okay.
the end of the
All right.
presentation.
Okay, so this is a little convoluted paper. So I read it before and I saw their demonstration. It doesn't explain very well, but after today's presentation, I think we understand this thing a little bit better. Yeah, so the idea here for magic pair is basically a addendum on top of the Bluetooth pairing, which will eliminate some of the vulnerability for regular Bluetooth connection. But during this magic pairing process, it also exposed some of the vulnerability. It would be more interesting to see if some attacker posts or launch a man-in-the-middle attack capable to completely break, the magic pairing. So basically, he can intercept all the communication beyond after the magic pairing complete. If he was able to establish or acquire or generate his own key in that keychain, so he can communicate with all the devices that are associated with iCloud. But okay, I see where they're going with this paper, and I think this analysis looks interesting, but although they're still preliminary and relatively incomplete in the sense of research, but I see that there's some follow-up work that can be done on this project. Okay, so let's do a few questions. The first one from Brian. If other ecosystems want to implement the magic pairing, what change or addition would they need on top of theirs? So I think Brian is asking, how can we improve Apple's magic pairing? How could Apple improve their magic pairing or any other ecosystem that has a public key infrastructure capable of improving the magic pairing process? Okay. All right, so I think I can give you a brief answer for this. So right now, for Bluetooth protocol, the most commonly used pairing process using this key derivation protocol known as Diffie-Hellman. Diffie-Hellman is known to be vulnerable to man-in-the-middle. Okay, so there is a possible extension to Diffie-Hellman called the stationary protocol, which will basically prevent this this issue related to man-in-the-middle. So the idea here is during Diffie-Hellman, when you receive the message, you will basically authenticate that message before you generate the session. That will require a public key infrastructure. And if that one is in place, if both devices is capable of connecting to that cloud or some kind of public key infrastructure sitting on the internet, then that stationary protocol can be implemented. But that requires both parties to be capable to grab the other party's credential from the internet, which is usually not the case for some simple peripherals such as your earpiece, right? Because your earpiece just simply cannot connect to the internet. It doesn't have an interface that allows it to connect to the internet. So magic pair is work in the, I think it's a correct direction here. Something that related to using a chain, using sort of a key chain, or let's call it a hash chain to distribute the key. So whenever you have a new node coming in, you grab the original key chain and you generate the nodes there. Okay, So if it is a chain data structure, we can use other type of chain, right? We can use a linked list. We can use a two-directional linked list, right? And we can use something like a more complicated, such as maybe I don't know, maybe something like a blockchain, if speed is not necessary. So it depends on how other person implement this chain in order to create this this type of keychain that will be able to distribute among multiple devices. Another possibility to improve it is instead of a chain, you use a completely different data infrastructure. Data structure such as a tree, right? So with a different, as long as all your secrets, all the session key can link back to a master key, you can use whatever data structure that you want to distribute or to grow this keychain, right? So it's really depend on your choice of a parameter in terms of performance and speed and your vulnerability window. You can use different data structure to derive this keychain and to generate this keychain, which might be a direction other ecosystem can consider to improve this system. Right? Does that answer your question, Brian? Okay. All right. Let's do another question from Alvin. Are protocols in general that attempt to streamline the user experience, seamless pairing, more vulnerable than others? So Alvin is asking about basically the idea of a zero interaction device pairing, or sometimes it's known as automatic device pairing. So when you have two devices, you don't need to input anything. They just, all of a sudden they recognize that they're being used by the same user, and they pair each other. Okay. I would say any comments from Dawei and Matthew?
I mean, I think I'd say generally yes, because I guess you just have a trade-off between convenience versus security. And I think to complete that triangle, you could also talk about cost or power, because at the beginning of the paper, they also say that you can secure Bluetooth by encrypting things multiple times. I think it talked about a double encryption, but that takes a lot of time and power. So I guess my final answer is it's a trade-off between those three. Yeah.
How about you, Dawei?
I kind of agree that one, but I believe most of the vulnerability can be improved in the future because most of them are just from some of them they just can improve, not very hard.
Well, yeah. So, but if you think about it, let's just do a kind of a sci-fi level imagination. How people do authentication and the confidentiality, right? So we have multiple sensor on our body, and we were able to do identification and authentication pretty easy, right? So we can easily recognize some people that we know, and we can talk in confidence by the various means. And I think that is the sort of the vision of the future kind of automatic device pairing. Although we're light years away from that vision, but that's basically the concept of this kind of automatic device pairing. Because of the limited capability of our electronic device, we cannot achieve that kind of sophisticated, authenticity, sophisticated way like a human being to protect authenticity and confidentiality. But because we are integrating more sensors into a device, right, and we have more, robust algorithms such as machine learning that allow the device to fuse those sensing information to have more intelligent decision, that will make it possible for the device to eventually achieve this thing that will both simultaneously provide convenience, and it will not sacrifice any of the vulnerability. But it really depends on the future breakthrough in terms of sensing and also machine learning and something that in the AI, in the AI domain. But I think right now there is really a trade-off. But whenever we consider a trade-off, that means that we have an overall, let's say a boundary where if we push in one direction, we're gonna need to sacrifice in a different direction because the overall area of this optimization problem need to remain the same. But if we can actually expand the area, we can enlarge that area, then all of a sudden we probably don't need to sacrifice that much in terms of, in both directions, because we just basically have a more capacity, some device that is more capable. Okay, so I think that will be a kind of a meta answer to Alvin's question, but that is sort of the research direction that people have been working on for the past decades on automatic device theft. Okay, let's do a final one from Chang. Can an attacker repeatedly try to pair with the AirPods to make the battery drain faster, even if the pairing is not a success? What's your take on that, Dawei?
Yes, I think so. They just send a very big ratchet number, so keep the loop run several hours, because the magic pairing doesn't verify the ratchet number, the local ratchet number.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you can definitely run on an infinite loop. So try to ask the device to generate a new session key, right, or accessory key and hint. But it really depends on how efficient is this attack, which depends on how efficient or power efficient the actual encryption, right? They use encryption to derive new keys of the AES is. And the answer for that is right now for AES encryption, symmetric key encryption, the power consumption is really low. So to generate a key is like nothing. So you don't drain a lot of power for each round of the session key generation. It's not like something like an asymmetric key is encryption. Something like pairing, elliptic curve pairing, that will cost a lot of power, right? So, because you are basically do a mapping from one domain to another domain on a finite field. But for symmetric key, you're basically just doing permutation and you're doing substitution. That can be done with very efficiently with either a microcontroller or with something better, maybe a small FPGA. It doesn't drain a lot of power. So that attack, although can be done, it might not be a very efficient attack, to way or efficient way to drain power. I would say it will actually probably drain more if you just jam this device and ask it to scan the wireless spectrum. That might cost more. Okay. All right. So I think we're out of time here. I will just post the other question in your reports comment section, and you need to give a point-to-point response to all the questions. In the meantime, when you are doing the report, know that for this particular paper, they have a replicability label. That means that they have submitted some code that you will be able to try and do the over-the-air or in-process fuzzy for the magic pairing. That might be something that you want to take a look at in order to complete your reports. Okay? All right, very good presentation. Thank you. I think we learned a lot about magic pairing today. And that will complete this week's presentation on mobile app security. And next week, we will have two papers on physical layer security presented by Samson and Noah. All right, so that will be all for this week's lecture, and I will see everybody next Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.